Grab a seat, pour yourself some tea, or sake if you're feeling bold, and let's dive into the dark, smoky, and totally unglamorous world of ninjas. Forget the black suits fluttering against the moonlight or throwing stars slicing through the air with pinpoint accuracy. Real ninjas, or shinobi as they were called in Japan, weren't anime superheroes or Hollywood stuntmen. They were peasants, mercenaries, spies, and sometimes just people who ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time with a very sharp kunai in hand. Their lives were full of dirt, sweat, betrayal, and, if they were lucky, a few coins to survive another day. So before we start, hit that like button if you love shadow stories, and drop a comment with where you're reading from. Ready? Dim the lights, imagine the smell of rice fields and smoke, and let's head to Sengoku-era Japan. The reality behind the myth. Let's get one thing straight right off the bat. You're probably picturing a ninja as a martial arts master leaping across rooftops with a katana strapped to their back, pulling off secret missions for some mysterious daimyo. Or maybe you see them in a sleek black outfit, blending into the night, tossing shuriken at guards and vanishing in a puff of smoke. Thanks, anime, movies, and video games for that image. But real ninjas? They were closer to a weary peasant who learned to sneak through a forest to avoid a samurai patrol. Their lives weren't cool. They were brutal, dirty, and often very short. Ninjas weren't born in secret temples atop misty mountains. They didn't get invitations to a shinobi academy with a fancy scroll and a mentor who looks like Yoda. Most of them were ordinary folks, farmers, woodcutters, fishermen, or petty thieves, living in the rugged villages of Iga or Koga, regions that became legendary for ninjas. These places weren't elite bases. They were backwater dumps where the soil was rocky, taxes were high, and samurai rolled through now and then to remind everyone who's boss. If you were born in one of those villages, you had two choices: toil in the rice fields until you dropped or learn to survive by your wits. Ninjas chose the latter. Being a shinobi didn't mean being a hero. You weren't saving princesses, fighting dragons, or getting medals. You were a shadow doing the dirty work for those with power. Daimyo warring over territories or merchants looking to eliminate rivals. Your job might involve spying, sabotage, arson, or, sometimes assassination. But more often, you were stealing documents, eavesdropping on conversations, or causing chaos to make the enemy think they were being hunted by demons. And guess what? You didn't do it for glory. You did it because otherwise, your village might not survive the next samurai raid. Who became a ninja? Nobody woke up one morning thinking, "Today, I'll become a ninja so I can sneak into castles and throw shuriken." It wasn't a career choice like becoming a blacksmith or a monk. Becoming a shinobi meant life had kicked you around pretty hard, and you'd ended up at the bottom of the social ladder. Picture this: you're a peasant in Iga province, 16th century. You're working a field, but half your crop goes to taxes. Your local daimyo is at war with a neighbor, and his samurai regularly burn villages to weaken the enemy. You've got no weapons, no army, and frankly, no chance of fighting off a mounted warrior in armor. What do? You hide. You learn to blend into the forest, steal food, trick patrols. Then one day, someone in your village whispers, "There's a job. Pays in rice. Gotta sneak into a camp and burn their supply depot." Congrats, you're a ninja now. Most shinobi came from the lower classes. Peasants were the bulk, but there were also deserter samurai who'd lost their lord or small-time crooks who'd fled justice. If you had land or a title, you didn't become a ninja, you hired them. But if you were a nobody with an empty stomach and quick feet, you had a shot. Women could be shinobi too, called kunoichi. They often worked as spies, using their inconspicuous roles as maids or geishas to gather intel. But don't kid yourself, their lives were just as dangerous and thankless. Why would anyone agree to this? Money, or rather, its equivalent, rice, cloth, maybe a few coins. But the pay rarely matched the risk. More often, fear drove you. Refusing a job could mean your village lost protection or got punished. Or worse, they'd kill you to keep you quiet. Being a ninja meant walking a tightrope between survival and betrayal, and most chose survival, even if it meant selling their skills to whoever paid. The myth of ninja training. Time to debunk the big one. You're probably imagining a ninja training in a secret dojo, honing katana strikes, jumping through flaming hoops, or meditating under a waterfall. Movies love this image: a stern sensei, scrolls with secret techniques, trials that turn you into a killing machine. The reality: if you survived your first mission, that was your training. Ninjas didn't attend academies. In IGA and Koga, clans passed down knowledge within families or communities, but these weren't structured schools. Think of it more like a gritty family business than Hogwarts for spies. Kids in IGA villages learned to sneak through forests, hide in reeds, or climb cliffs not because they dreamed of being ninjas, but because it was part of survival. If your uncle knew how to make a smoke bomb from manure and sulfur, he might show you, not for glory, but so you didn't blow yourself up. Training was practical and chaotic. Want to learn combat? Grab a bamboo stick and hope your older brother doesn't break your arm. Need to climb walls? Start with a barn, but don't wake the chickens, or the farmer will thrash you. Poisons? Trial and error, heavy on the error. Some plants killed, some just gave you diarrhea, and some ruined your day. There were no manuals or masterclasses. You learned by watching, stealing tricks from others, or most likely, surviving your screw-ups. Martial arts? Not quite. Ninjas weren't kung fu masters. Their skills were closer to guerrilla tactics. Quick strike, retreat, vanish. If you knew how to hold a kunai or swing a kuzurigama, a sickle with a chain, that was already an achievement. But your real weapon wasn't a blade, it was your brain. You learned to deceive, lie, hide. If a samurai challenged you to a duel, you didn't accept. You ran, because duels were for fools, and you wanted to live until tomorrow. Sometimes knowledge was passed down through scrolls, but these weren't spy encyclopedias. Picture a scrap of paper with a few notes: "Don't eat this berry, it kills," or "Walnut smoke quiets dogs." Famous scrolls like the Bansen Shuki came later, in the 17th century, when the ninja era was fading. In the Sengoku period, you relied on experience and luck. If you were lucky, an older shinobi might show you how not to fall off a roof or choke on your own smoke bomb. But mentors didn't give motivational speeches. They either beat you for mistakes or left you to die if you were too slow. Life in the shadows. Being a ninja meant living outside society. In Sengoku Japan, the social order was rigid: samurai at the top, peasants at the bottom, and ninjas? They were nobody. Even thieves had a better reputation because they didn't pretend to be demons. Shinobi had no honor in the eyes of samurai. To a warrior in armor, you were a rat skulking in the dark, defying the code of Bushido. But guess what? Samurai hired you because their code didn't win wars. You couldn't brag about your work. Imagine you're in a village, drinking sake, and say, "Yeah, I burned an enemy depot last night." By morning, you're either hanged or turned over to the nearest patrol. You couldn't trust anyone, not neighbors, not family, not even the client who hired you. Everyone knew a shinobi was a problem best solved quietly. And if you botched a mission, they didn't just fire you. They found you. Or they burned your village as a warning to others. Your life was constant tightrope walking. You couldn't stay in one place too long because rumors spread faster than a forest fire. You couldn't wear recognizable clothes or weapons, that gave you away. And you definitely couldn't afford to relax. One extra sip of sake, one careless word, and you woke up with a kunai in your back. Being a ninja meant being invisible not just to enemies, but to the world. You left no tracks. You had no name. And if you did your job right, no one ever knew you were there. Why was it so hard? Picture a typical mission. Your client, a local daimyo, wants you to sneak into an enemy castle and steal their battle plans. Sounds simple, right? Now, The reality. The castle is a fortress with stone walls, a moat, and dozens of armed samurai. The gates are locked, the roofs are patrolled by archers, and inside, it's a maze of corridors where every creaky floorboard could betray you. You've got a kunai, a rope, maybe a pouch of smoke powder you made from whatever you found in the forest. And, oh yeah, if you get caught, they won't just kill you, they'll torture you until you spill every name you know. Your training. A few tricks your cousin taught you and years of running from dogs. Your weapons. Sharp, but rusty. Your plan. Half improvisation, half prayer to gods you might have offended by stealing rice from a temple. And even if you pull it off, there's no guarantee you'll get paid. Your client might decide it's cheaper to kill you than hand over the promised sack of rice. And if you fail, your name, if anyone even knows it, becomes a synonym for shame, and your village might pay for your mistake. Being a ninja meant living in a world where every step could be your last. You weren't a hero taking down armies. You were a shadow stealing scraps of power for those who stood in the light. And the worst part? You knew that even if you won, no one would remember your name. Because in the end, ninjas didn't make history. They vanished into it. The shinobi arsenal. Not what you think. Forget Hollywood fantasies. Ninjas didn't have gleaming katanas that sliced through steel or shuriken that hit a fly from 100 meters. Their arsenal was as humble as their lives. Anything you could steal, scavenge, or cobble together from whatever was lying around the village. If you're picturing a shinobi with James Bond's gadget collection, fancy crossbows, explosives, or poison darts, prepare to be disappointed. Your average ninja carried what could be hidden under a tattered straw cloak and didn't clank when you ran. The kunai was the go-to weapon. But this wasn't some elegant dagger engraved with a dragon. A kunai was a crude, multi-purpose tool, like a gardening knife with a wide blade and a sturdy handle. You used it for digging, chopping, prying, and, in a pinch, stabbing. It was cheap, you could nick it from a blacksmith, and, if you were lucky, it didn't snap after hitting a samurai's armor. Accuracy. Forget it. Throwing a kunai was like chucking a brick. Unless you really practiced, it rarely hit where you aimed. Shuriken, or throwing stars, are probably the most iconic ninja symbol. But reality is far from anime. Shuriken weren't deadly weapons. They were small, sharp bits of metal, sometimes star-shaped, sometimes just pointed sticks. You threw them to distract, nick, or ideally, spook an enemy into thinking a whole gang was attacking. Accuracy took years to master, and most ninjas didn't have that kind of time. More often, your shuriken got stuck in a door or fell in the mud, leaving you cursing as you bolted. The kusarigama, a sickle with a chain, sounds badass but was more a weapon of desperation. Picture this. You swing the sickle to catch a samurai's sword while whipping the chain to knock them off their feet. On paper, genius. In practice, you either looked like a legend or got tangled in your own chain and face-planted in the dirt. The kusarigama was only effective in the hands of someone with talent and nerves of steel, and those were rare. Smoke bombs, another myth that needs debunking. Yes, ninjas used smoke, but these weren't neat movie grenades. You took a pouch filled with a mix of sulfur, ash, sometimes manure or dried herbs, lit it, and prayed it didn't explode in your hands. The smoke was thick, stinky, and more likely to irritate eyes than blind anyone. Half the time, you were coughing your lungs out while trying to escape as guards swore and swung swords in the haze. Poisons. They existed but were unreliable. Ninjas might use sap from toxic plants like aconite or powder from crushed bugs. But poisoning someone in a castle was near impossible. Food was tested by servants, water was watched, and most poisons worked slowly. Your target might spend a week with a stomachache but survive and put a bounty on your head. Sometimes the poison killed the wrong person, like the cook who tasted the soup. Then you had to explain to your client why their brilliant plan failed because of your genius poison. Other tools? Ropes for climbing, bamboo tubes for breathing underwater, small spikes, tetsubishi, to slow pursuers. All of it was homemade, fragile, and often failed at the worst moment. Your arsenal didn't impress enemies, it kept you alive. And if your kunai broke or your smoke bomb fizzled, you improvised, a rock, a stick, even a handful of dirt in the enemy's eyes. Anything worked when your life was on the line. Shinobi methods, cunning, chaos, and survival. Ninjas weren't warriors in the classic sense. Samurai fought openly, with honor, on battlefields. Shinobi. They avoided fights because a straight-up brawl meant death. Their strength was in cunning, deception, and creating chaos. Here's how they operated. Espionage was the bread and rice of ninja work. Your job might be simple. Sneak into a castle and overhear a conversation between two generals. But simple, in Sengoku Japan, meant scaling a wall, dodging patrols, hiding in the ceiling, and not sneezing from the dust while the daimyo discussed plans. You could spend hours dangling under a beam, legs numb, listening to guards gripe about bad food. If you were lucky, you learned something useful. If not, you risked your life for gossip about the daimyo's new horse. Sabotage was a favorite trick. Burning a rice depot, poisoning a well, spreading rumors that the enemy was planning a betrayal, all could spark panic without swinging a sword. For example, you might sneak into a camp and cut the saddles on their horses. Or plant a fake letter hinting at a conspiracy. The best sabotage made enemies doubt their own allies. But it required precision. One wrong move, and you left a trail straight back to your village. Assassinations were rare but the most dangerous. Killing a daimyo or general meant slipping past dozens of guards, avoiding dogs, servants, and maybe even the target, who slept with a sword under their pillow. You couldn't just toss a shuriken and run. You had to get close, strike quietly, and vanish before anyone raised the alarm. And even then, success didn't guarantee safety. Killing a big shot meant they'd hunt you with double the fury. Psychological warfare was another weapon. Ninjas loved playing on superstitions. Imagine leaving a doll with pierced eyes in an enemy camp or painting a curse symbol on a wall. Soldiers start whispering about demons, and half the army loses sleep. Or you mimic owl hoots at night, considered harbingers of death. It didn't kill enemies, but it made them jittery, prone to mistakes, and sapped their morale. All this sounded cool, but in practice, it was messy. Plans went sideways. Smoke bombs failed. Dogs barked at the worst moment. And your client, who promised a sack of rice, might suddenly decide you knew too much. Every mission was a roll of the dice, with your life as the stake. The hell of missions. Why everything went wrong. Picture a typical mission. Your client, a daimyo from a neighboring province, wants you to steal scrolls with the enemy's battle plans. He promises rice and protection for your village. Sounds like a deal, right? Now, let's get to reality. Obstacle 1. The fortress. The enemy castle isn't a bamboo hut. It's a stone stronghold with a moat, high walls, and gates guarded by samurai with swords longer than you are tall. The only way in is to climb the wall or sneak through the sewer. Both options suck. The wall's slippery from rain, and the sewer smells like you'd rather die. And even if you're inside, every corridor is a maze where a creaky floorboard could give you away. Obstacle 2. The guards. Samurai don't sleep on duty. They're alert, armed to the teeth, and often have dogs that can smell you a mile away. Servants are even worse. They're everywhere, scrubbing floors, carrying food, gossiping. One maid spots your face, and by morning, the whole castle knows some peasant in a straw hat looked shady. Obstacle 3. Your target. The scrolls aren't sitting on a table labeled secret plans. They're locked in a chest with 3 locks, in a room where a general sleeps with 2 guards. And even if you get the scrolls, how do you carry them out? You can't just stuff them under your kimono and stroll out pretending to be a servant. Every exit is guarded, and alarms go up faster than you can say, oops. Obstacle 4. Escape. Let's say you nabbed the scrolls. Congrats. Now get out. The gates are locked, archers are on the walls, and dogs are sniffing your trail. You've got a rope, but it's old and might snap. Smoke bomb. 50-50 chance it's a dud. And even if you escape the castle, the forest is crawling with patrols who know the terrain better than you. One wrong step, and you're in a cage, waiting to be chopped to bits. Obstacle 5. The client. You return with the scrolls, bleeding but alive. But your daimyo doesn't throw you a parade. At best, he tosses you a sack of rice and says, "Get lost." At worst, he sends his samurai to tie up loose ends, meaning you. You know too much. You've seen his plans. You're not an asset anymore, you're a liability. Congrats on a successful mission. Now run before you catch an arrow in the back. Every mission was a test of not just skill but nerves. You couldn't trust anyone, not the client, not the middleman, not even your own gear. One failure, and you didn't just lose the job. You lost your head. Or your village lost everything. Why ninjas survived, sometimes. If missions were such hell, how did ninjas survive at all? Simple. They didn't rely on strength. They relied on brains, cunning, and the ability to disappear. The best shinobi weren't the ones swinging a kusarigama, but those who could walk past a patrol pretending to be a drunk peasant. They knew the terrain better than samurai because they lived in those forests and mountains. They learned to read the weather, predict enemy movements, exploit weaknesses, a guard's laziness, a servant's greed, fear of the supernatural. But even the best shinobi weren't invincible. Most didn't live to old age. One bad leap off a roof, one betrayal, one dog barking in the night, and your career was over. Those who survived did so because they were paranoidly cautious. They didn't celebrate victories. They didn't brag in tea houses. They took their pay, melted into the shadows, and prepped for the next mission, knowing every day could be their last. Ninjas weren't heroes. They weren't even villains. They were tools used by daimyo, merchants, even monasteries to win wars the shinobi didn't start. Their work brought no glory, only survival. And that was their tragedy. They risked everything to stay invisible, knowing history wouldn't remember their names. The myth of the black ninja suit. Let's start with the biggest cliché, the black ninja suit. You know the one, skin-tight, hooded, perfect for leaping across rooftops while looking like a badass. Thanks, movies and video games, for making us think every shinobi dressed like a Sengoku-era cat burglar. The reality. That outfit would get you killed faster than you could say, stealth fail. Black stands out at night, especially under moonlight, and a hooded figure skulking around a village screams, suspicious. Real ninjas didn't wear uniforms. They wore whatever made them blend in, and blending in was their superpower. Picture yourself in a Sengoku village. The streets are muddy, lanterns cast shaky light, and samurai patrols are itching for an excuse to draw their swords. If you're caught wearing a black bodysuit with a shuriken pouch, you're not a ninja, you're a dead man walking. Instead, ninjas dressed like everyone else. Peasants in patched kimonos, merchants with straw hats, or wandering monks with shaved heads and robes. The goal was to be forgettable. A shinobi might carry a basket of radishes to pass as a farmer, or sling a sack over their shoulder to look like a traveling peddler. If anyone glanced your way, they'd see just another nobody, not a spy with a kunai hidden in their sleeve. Disguises weren't just about clothes. They were about behavior. A ninja had to act the part. Want to infiltrate a castle? You might pose as a servant hauling firewood, keeping your eyes down and muttering apologies to avoid attention. Or you'd play a drunk stumbling through a market, slurring nonsense to eavesdrop on guards' chatter. The best shinobi were chameleons, slipping into roles so naturally that even their own mothers wouldn't recognize them. But it wasn't easy. One wrong gesture, a peasant bowing too politely or a monk forgetting a prayer, and you were done. In a world where everyone was paranoid, standing out was a death sentence. Disguises had to be practical, too. You couldn't carry a full wardrobe. A ninja might reverse their kimono to change its pattern, or stuff straw under their shirt to look bulkier. A bamboo hat could hide your face, but it had to be common enough not to raise eyebrows. Weapons. Forget strapping a katana to your back. You hid a kunai in a bundle of cloth, or tucked tetsubishi spikes in a pouch disguised as a coin purse. Everything about you had to scream ordinary, because ordinary didn't get a second glance. Social mimicry, becoming someone else. Disguises were only half the game. To pull off a mission, a ninja had to master social mimicry, blending into the crowd not just by looking right, but by acting, talking, and even thinking like someone else. Sengoku Japan was a rigid society. Samurai, peasants, merchants, and priests all had their place, and stepping out of line drew attention. A shinobi had to navigate this like a tightrope walker in a storm. Take posing as a peasant. Sounds simple, right? Just throw on a dirty kimono and carry a hoe. But peasants had their own slang, their own grudges, their own way of moving through the world. You had to know how to complain about taxes without sounding rehearsed, how to haggle over a fish without slipping into a merchant's tone. If a samurai stopped you, you'd better bow low enough to show respect, but not so low you looked like you were hiding something. One slip, a word too formal, a gesture too confident, and the patrol was on you like flies on rice. Merchants were another common disguise. They could move between towns without raising suspicion, carrying goods and gossip. But playing a merchant meant knowing trade routes, prices, and the latest news about rival clans. You had to charm customers, bribe guards, and laugh off insults without losing your cool. And if someone asked about your hometown, you'd better have a story ready, complete with fake relatives and a grudge against the local tax collector. Monks were a ninja's dream disguise. Wandering priests could travel freely, beg for alms, and even enter castles to offer blessings. But you had to shave your head, memorize Buddhist chants, and carry a staff that didn't double as a weapon. If a real monk challenged your knowledge of scripture, you were toast. And good luck keeping your cool when a samurai demanded you pray for his sick horse while you're itching to steal the battle plans hidden in his study. The hardest part? Switching roles on the fly. One day, you're a fisherman muttering about bad catches to slip past a dock patrol. The next, you're a scribe delivering a fake letter to a daimyo's advisor. Each role required a new voice, new mannerisms, new lies. And you had to sell it under pressure, with guards watching your every move and servants whispering about strangers. A good shinobi wasn't just a spy, they were an actor, a con artist, a psychologist, all rolled into one. But even the best could slip. One wrong word, one glance too sharp, and you were dragged to the dungeon, praying your client didn't sell you out first. The kunoichi, women in the shadows. Now, let's talk about the unsung heroes of the ninja world. Kunoichi, the female shinobi. Pop culture loves to paint them as seductive assassins in skimpy outfits, luring men to their doom with a flutter of lashes. Reality. Kunoichi were just as gritty, paranoid, and overworked as their male counterparts, but they had an edge. In a society that overlooked women, they could slip through cracks no man could. Women in Sengoku Japan were often invisible. They were maids, cooks, entertainers, wives, roles that put them in the background of castles, tea-houses, and markets. Kunoichi turned this to their advantage. A male ninja might struggle to infiltrate a daimyo's inner circle, but a woman posing as a servant could mop floors in the war room, overhearing every word of a battle plan. A kunoichi disguised as a geisha could charm a drunken general into spilling secrets, all while pouring his sake and smiling. And if she played a merchant's wife, she could haggle in the market, picking up gossip about troop movements without anyone batting an eye. Kunoichi didn't rely on seduction, though it could be a tool. Their real strength was social engineering. Women had access to spaces men didn't: kitchens, bathhouses, private quarters, where secrets flowed like water. A kunoichi might pose as a midwife to infiltrate a noble's home, delivering a baby while memorizing the layout of the estate. Or she'd play a shrine maiden, collecting donations and eavesdropping on pilgrims' fears about the coming war. These roles let kunoichi gather intel that male shinobi could only dream of. But their work was brutal. Kunoichi faced the same dangers as men: capture, torture, death, but with added risks. A woman caught spying could face humiliation, assault, or worse before execution. They had to be sharper, faster, and more cautious than their male peers. Their weapons, often subtler than a kunai. A hairpin could double as a lockpick or a dagger. A fan might hide a blade or a dose of poison. Even their kimonos could be rigged with hidden pockets for scrolls or tetsubishi. But like all shinobi, their greatest weapon was their mind, reading people, spotting weaknesses, and turning trust into a trap. Kunoichi also played the long game. A male ninja might sneak into a castle for a night, but a kunoichi could embed herself for months, building trust as a maid or concubine. She'd listen, observe, and report, all while dodging suspicion from jealous rivals or paranoid guards. If she was caught, escape was harder. Women couldn't blend into a crowd as easily as a wandering monk. And if her mission involved betrayal, she might have to abandon children, lovers, or friends she'd grown close to, all to keep her cover. The tragedy of kunoichi was their invisibility, even among ninjas. Male shinobi got the glory in legends, but kunoichi? Their names were rarely recorded. They were the whispers behind the throne, the shadows in the kitchen, the smiles that hid a knife. And like all shinobi, they worked knowing no one would ever thank them, or even know they existed. The risks of blending in. Disguises and mimicry sound foolproof, but they came with a catch. The better you blended in, the deeper you sank into a world of lies, and the harder it was to get out. Every role you played chipped away at who you were. A shinobi might spend weeks as a merchant, laughing with customers, sharing sake with locals, only to burn their shop in a sabotage mission. A kunoichi might befriend a noble's wife, trading stories about their children, then slip poison into her husband's tea. You had to live the lie so fully that even you started to believe it, until the mission reminded you it was all a sham. Suspicion was everywhere. Sengoku Japan was a pressure cooker of paranoia. Villages watched strangers like hawks. Castles had spies spying on spies. Even peasants reported odd behavior, hoping for a reward. A shinobi had to be perfect every second. Forget to limp when posing as a beggar? Someone notices. Use a regional accent from the wrong province? You're questioned. Hesitate when asked your master's name? You're in chains. And if you were caught, no one came to save you. Your client would deny knowing you, and your village might disown you to avoid retaliation. Then there was the emotional toll. Playing a role meant building connections, friends, allies, even lovers, who thought you were someone else. But a ninja couldn't afford attachments. The merchant you drank with might be your next target. The maid you confided in might betray you for a handful of rice. Every smile, every shared joke, was a risk. And when the mission ended, you vanished, leaving behind people who'd curse your name if they knew the truth. For kunoichi, this was even harder. Posing as a mother, sister, or wife meant weaving yourself into lives you'd eventually destroy. The best shinobi were those who could shut off their hearts, but even they cracked sometimes. And let's not forget the physical risks. Disguises didn't make you bulletproof. A kunai hidden in your sleeve was useless if a samurai caught you snooping. A kunoichi's hairpin couldn't stop a guard's spear. If you were exposed, escape was your only hope, and that meant abandoning your cover, your gear, maybe even your allies. Running through a forest with patrols on your tail, knowing one misstep could end it all, was a ninja's reality. And if you made it back to your village? You'd better hope no one followed you, because a single traitor could bring samurai to your doorstep. Why disguises mattered. So why bother with all this? Why not just sneak in at night and be done with it? Because ninjas weren't superhumans. They couldn't scale castle walls in broad daylight or fight off a dozen samurai. Disguises and mimicry were their shield, their sword, their only way to survive in a world that wanted them dead. A shinobi who could pass as a nobody could walk through a guarded gate while a black-clad ninja would be shot on sight. A kunoichi who played her role perfectly could learn secrets that changed the course of a war, all without drawing a blade. But it came at a cost. Every disguise distanced you from yourself. Every lie made you question who you were. And every mission left you more alone, because the better you were at blending in, the less anyone knew the real you. Ninjas didn't just hide from enemies, they hid from the world, from their families, from themselves. Their lives were a performance, and the stage was a battlefield where one bad act meant curtains. The loneliness of the shinobi. Being a ninja wasn't just dangerous, it was a one-way ticket to a life of isolation. In Sengoku Japan, where community was everything, shinobi were outsiders, even among their own. You didn't get to sit around the village fire, swapping stories with neighbors. You didn't have a family you could trust with your secrets. You didn't even have a name worth remembering. To be a ninja was to erase yourself, to become a ghost who moved through the world without leaving a trace. And that kind of life. It broke you, piece by piece. Imagine you're a shinobi in Iga province. By day, you're a farmer, tilling the same rocky fields as your neighbors. But by night, you're sneaking through forests, stealing scrolls or setting fires for a daimyo who'd rather see you dead than pay you. You can't tell your wife where you're going, she might let it slip over tea. You can't confide in your brother, he might sell you out for a sack of rice. Your kids. They think you're just a quiet man who disappears sometimes, but they'll never know why. Every mission pulls you further from the people you love, because the more they know, the more danger they're in. And if you're caught, your village might burn just for being associated with you. Even within ninja clans, trust was rare. Iga and Koga villages were tight-knit, but shinobi weren't exactly singing around campfires together. You might train with your cousin, share a smoke bomb recipe with a friend, but you never let your guard down. Why? Because loyalty was fragile. A desperate clan member might betray you to save their own skin. A rival might sabotage your mission to curry favor with a client. Even your mentor, the grizzled shinobi who taught you how to climb a wall, might slit your throat if you learned too much of his trade. Every handshake hid a potential knife. Missions made it worse. A shinobi could spend weeks or months away, posing as a merchant or monk, building fake lives with people who'd never know the real you. You might laugh with a teahouse owner, share sake with a guard, or comfort a crying child in a market, all while planning to betray them. Those connections felt real, but they weren't. When the job was done, you vanished, leaving behind ashes and curses. And each time, a piece of you stayed behind, too. The more you lied, the less you remembered who you were. Friends. Family. They were luxuries you couldn't afford, because attachment was a chain, and chains got you caught. Kunoichi had it even harder. Female ninjas often played roles that demanded emotional intimacy: maids, geishas, concubines. A kunoichi might spend years in a daimyo's household, raising his children, charming his allies, all while feeding secrets to his enemies. She'd build bonds she couldn't keep, knowing one day she'd have to slip away or betray the people she'd grown to care for. If she faltered, if she let herself feel too much, she risked everything. And when she returned to her village, she faced whispers from those who didn't trust a woman who'd lived among the enemy. For kunoichi, loneliness wasn't just a side effect, it was the job. The worst part. There was no escape. You couldn't retire, settle down, and open a noodle shop. A shinobi knew too much: names, plans, betrayals. Your clients, whether daimyo or merchants, saw you as a loose end. Your village might protect you, but only as long as you were useful. Stop taking missions, and you were a liability. Keep going, and you'd eventually slip up. Either way, the shadows claimed you. Most shinobi died young, but those who survived grew old alone, haunted by faces they'd betrayed and names they'd forgotten. The paranoia that kept you alive. If loneliness was the cost of being a ninja, paranoia was the currency that kept you breathing. In Sengoku, Japan, everyone was watching everyone else. Villages reported strangers to avoid trouble. Samurai hunted spies to prove their loyalty. Even monks and merchants played the game, trading secrets for favors. For a shinobi, every glance was a threat, every whisper a potential trap. Paranoia wasn't just a mindset, it was survival. Picture a mission. You're posing as a peddler, selling pots in a market to get close to a castle gate. The sun's setting, the crowd's thinning, and you're memorizing the guards' patrol patterns. But then a woman buying rice lingers too long, her eyes flicking to your face. Is she just curious, or is she a spy for the daimyo? A drunk bumps into you, muttering an apology. Did he slip a note in your sleeve, or was it an accident? The innkeeper offers you sake, but his smile's too wide. Poison, or just bad teeth? Every moment was a calculation, every interaction a gamble. Relax for a second, and you'd be dead by dawn. This paranoia bled into everything. Back in your village, you couldn't trust your neighbors. Maybe they envied your pay and tipped off a samurai patrol. Maybe they were working for a rival clan. Even your own clan wasn't safe. Someone might betray you to secure a better deal. You slept with a kunai under your mat, checked your food for poison, and never walked the same path twice. Friends. They were just enemies who hadn't stabbed you yet. Family. They were leverage for anyone hunting you. The only person you could rely on was yourself, and even then, you second-guessed your own instincts. Paranoia saved you, but it also broke you. A shinobi who lived long enough started seeing threats everywhere. That rustle in the bushes? Could be a fox, or an assassin. That letter from a client? Maybe a coded order to kill you. Some shinobi became so paranoid they stopped trusting their own senses, jumping at shadows or lashing out at allies. Others burned out, their nerves frayed from years of constant vigilance. A few even vanished, abandoning their villages to live as hermits, unable to handle the weight of always watching their back. Paranoia kept you alive, but it made you a prisoner in your own mind. For kunoichi, paranoia was doubled. As women, they were already vulnerable in a world ruled by men. A kunoichi had to watch not just for enemy spies but for allies who might exploit her. A client might promise protection, then sell her out to cover his tracks. A fellow shinobi might see her as a threat and sabotage her mission. And in the castles or tea houses where she worked, every man was a potential danger. Some wanted secrets, others wanted more. A kunoichi learned to read every glance, every tone, every pause, because missing a cue could mean death or worse. Superstitions, ninjas as demons and ghosts. To the people of Sengoku, Japan, ninjas weren't just spies, they were something more. The way they appeared from nowhere, struck without warning, and vanished left villagers whispering about demons, ghosts, or vengeful spirits. These superstitions weren't just folklore, they shaped how shinobi were seen, feared, and hunted. And for the ninjas themselves, these myths were a double-edged sword, both a shield and a noose. Imagine you're a soldier in a daimyo's army. You're guarding a supply depot when a fire breaks out, seemingly from nowhere. By the time you grab a bucket, the whole place is ablaze, and you swear you saw a shadow slip into the woods. Was it a man, or something else? Back at camp, you hear stories, a guard found dead with no wounds, a warlord's horse spooked by an owl's cry before a battle went wrong. The old man at the tea house swears the shinobi of Iga can turn into foxes or melt into walls. You laugh, but that night, you double-check your sword and pray to the gods, just in case. Ninjas leaned into these myths. A shinobi might leave a cursed talisman in an enemy camp to spark panic or mimic a spirit's wail to scare off patrols. Kunoichi were especially good at this, using their roles as shrine maidens or mystics to spread rumors of divine wrath. These tricks played on the era's deep superstitions. Owls signaled death, foxes were tricksters, and any strange event could be a sign of angry gods. A well-placed rumor could make an army hesitate, giving the ninja time to strike or escape. Fear was a weapon, and shinobi wielded it like a blade. But the myths cut both ways. Superstitions made ninjas terrifying, but they also made them targets. A village struck by a ninja's sabotage might blame demons and call in priests or witch hunters, who'd accuse anyone who seemed off, often the shinobi's own neighbors. Samurai, desperate to prove their worth, hunted ninjas with zeal, believing they were purging evil. And if a shinobi was caught, their punishment was brutal. Public execution, often with rituals to cleanse their demonic influence. The same myths that protected shinobi by making them seem supernatural also painted a target on their backs. For the ninjas themselves, these superstitions could be a psychological burden. Living as a demon meant living apart, even from those you protected. Your own village might fear you, whispering that your skills came from pacts with spirits. Children might run when you passed, and elders might mutter prayers to ward off your curse. Some shinobi leaned into the role, cultivating an aura of mystery to keep others at bay. Others struggled, craving the normalcy they could never have. And in quiet moments, even the most hardened shinobi might wonder, were the myths true? After years of living as a shadow, were they still human, or had they become something else? The cost of being a myth. Loneliness, paranoia, and superstition didn't just define a ninja's life, they defined their end. Most shinobi didn't die in glorious battles. They died alone, betrayed by a client, caught by a patrol, or simply worn down by a life of lies. The lucky ones faded into obscurity, living out their days in some forgotten village, haunted by memories of missions and faces they'd left behind. The unlucky ones? They became legends, but not the kind they wanted. Their names were erased, their stories twisted into tales of demons and ghosts, told to scare children or justify a daimyo's victory. The tragedy of the shinobi was that their greatest strength, their invisibility, was also their curse. They sacrificed everything to stay hidden, their names, their families, their humanity. They served lords who despised them, protected villages that feared them, and fought wars they didn't start. And when it was over, no one mourned them. No one built shrines to the shinobi. No one sang their songs. They were the shadows that made history, but history forgot them. The end of a shinobi's career. A ninja's life was a tightrope, and sooner or later, everyone fell. There was no golden retirement, no cozy cabin where you hung up your kunai and told war stories to wide-eyed grandkids. For most shinobi, the end came swiftly, a blade in the dark, a noose in a dungeon, or a quiet death from a wound that wouldn't heal. The lucky ones, those who survived long enough to grow old, faced a different kind of end, one shaped by betrayal, obsolescence, and the relentless march of Japan's unification. Let's walk through how a shinobi's career ended, and why it was never the happy ending you'd hope for. Betrayal by clients. The first and most common end for a shinobi was betrayal. Ninjas worked for daimyo, merchants, even monasteries, but loyalty was a one-way street. A client hired you to steal plans, burn a rival's fields, or silence a traitor, but once the job was done, you became a liability. You knew too much, names, strategies, secrets that could topple empires. The easiest way to keep you quiet? Kill you. Picture this, you've just returned from a mission, battered but successful, with a stolen scroll tucked in your kimono. You meet your client in a foggy grove, expecting a sack of rice. Instead, you see the glint of samurai armor in the trees. Your employer decided it's cheaper to bury you than pay you. You run, but the odds are stacked, your rope's frayed, your smoke bomb's damp, and the forest is crawling with men who know your tricks. Most shinobi didn't survive their first double-cross, and those who did learned to trust no one. Failed missions, even without betrayal, failure was a death sentence. A shinobi's job, sneaking into castles, sabotaging armies, assassinating warlords, was a high-stakes gamble where one mistake could cost everything. Trip on a roof tile, and you're falling into a courtyard full of archers. Misjudge a guard's patrol, and you're caught with a kunai in hand. Fail to spot a trap, and you're dangling in a net while samurai debate how to carve you up. Capture was worse than death. A caught shinobi faced torture to extract names of allies, clients, or villages. If you broke, you doomed everyone you knew. If you didn't, you died slowly, your body a warning to others. And even if you escaped, failure marked you. Your clan might shun you, your client might hunt you, and your reputation as a reliable shadow was ruined. In a world where trust was scarce, a failed shinobi was as good as dead. Success, and its price success was rare, but it wasn't a ticket to glory. Let's say you pulled off the impossible. You infiltrated a fortress, stole the enemy's war plans, and escaped without a scratch. Your client pays you a few bags of rice, maybe a coin or two, and your village celebrates, quietly. But what's next? Another mission, then another, each one riskier than the last. Success made you valuable, but it also made you a target. Rival daimyo heard of your skills and put bounties on your head. Your own client might fear your growing reputation and decide you're too dangerous to keep alive. And every job took a toll. Cuts that scarred, bones that ached, memories that woke you screaming. The best shinobi could string together a few victories, maybe enough to feed their family for a season. But the grind never stopped, and the shadows always called you back. Growing old, a shinobi who lived past their 30s was a rarity, a grizzled survivor who'd outrun death 100 times. But old age wasn't a reward, it was a curse. Your reflexes slowed, your joints creaked, and the tricks that saved you at 20 now felt like bets you couldn't win. Missions became harder, but stopping wasn't an option. Your village needed your skills, your family needed your pay, and your clients didn't care if your hands shook. Some old shinobi became mentors, teaching younger ninjas how to mix poisons or climb walls. But teaching was risky. Pass on too much, and your student might surpass you or sell your secrets. Others tried to fade away, moving to remote villages under false names. But the past always caught up. A former client might track you down to silence you. A rival clan might settle an old score. And even if you escaped, you lived with the ghosts of every mission, every betrayal, every face you left behind. Old shinobi didn't die in peace. They died watching the horizon, waiting for the knife they knew was coming. The fall of the shinobi, Japan's unification. The Sengoku era, with its endless wars and feuding daimyo, was the golden age of ninjas. Chaos bred opportunity, and shinobi thrived in the cracks between power. But by the late 16th century, the world began to change. Japan's unification under Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and finally Tokugawa Ieyasu spelled the end for the shinobi as a major force. Let's see how history closed the curtain on the ninja's stage. Oda Nobunaga's wrath. Oda Nobunaga, the ruthless warlord, hated ninjas. To him, shinobi were dishonorable rats who undermined the samurai code of Bushido. In 1581, he launched a brutal campaign against the ninja strongholds of Iga province. Tens of thousands of samurai swept through the region, burning villages, slaughtering clans, and crushing resistance. The Iga shinobi fought back with guerrilla tactics, ambushes, traps, sabotage, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Thousands died, and those who survived scattered, their communities shattered. Nobunaga's message was clear: the age of shadows was ending, and he'd burn it out if he had to. Toyotomi Hideyoshi's control. After Nobunaga's death, Toyotomi Hideyoshi continued the push for unification. He didn't destroy ninjas outright, but he tamed them. Hideyoshi hired shinobi for his own campaigns, using their skills to spy on rivals or sow chaos. But he also centralized power, reducing the chaos that ninjas thrived on. With fewer daimyo warring against each other, the demand for shinobi shrank. Some ninjas became retainers in Hideyoshi's service, trading their independence for stability. Others drifted to the margins, taking petty jobs for merchants or local lords. The freewheeling days of Iga and Koga were over, replaced by a world where loyalty to a single ruler mattered more than freelance cunning. Tokugawa shogunate's peace. The final nail came with Tokugawa Ieyasu and the establishment of the Tokugawa shogunate in 1603. The Edo period brought peace, or at least, a lack of open war. With Japan unified under one ruler, the need for spies, saboteurs, and assassins plummeted. The Tokugawa regime was paranoid, but it had its own spies, loyal samurai, and a bureaucracy to keep order. Ninjas were relics of a chaotic past, unneeded in a world of rigid control. Some shinobi found work as guards or informants for the shogunate, but their roles were diminished, their skills reduced to folklore. Others retreated to their villages, passing down scraps of knowledge in secret. By the 18th century, the shinobi were more legend than reality, their clans dissolved or absorbed into the new Japan. The ninja's legacy, from shadows to stories. As ninjas faded from the battlefield, they grew larger in the imagination. The myths that once made them demons in Sengoku Japan turned them into legends in the Edo period and beyond. Let's trace how the shinobi became the icons we know today. Folklore and Edo culture. In the peace of the Edo period, Japan craved stories of the chaotic past. Writers and artists spun tales of shinobi as supernatural tricksters, masters of disguise who could turn invisible, summon storms, or slip through walls. Scrolls like the Bansen Shuki, 1676, a compilation of ninja techniques, fueled these myths, blending fact with fantasy. Kabuki plays and woodblock prints showed ninjas in black suits, wielding shuriken and defying armies, far removed from the gritty peasants who'd once crept through rice fields. These stories weren't history, they were entertainment, turning shinobi into romantic outlaws for a society nostalgic for war. Modern pop culture. The ninja's leap to global fame came in the 20th century. Post-World War II Japan, eager to reclaim its cultural identity, revived shinobi in novels, comics, and films. The 1960s saw ninja movies explode, portraying shinobi as martial arts masters battling evil with acrobatic flair. Hollywood caught the fever, giving us black-clad assassins in films like Enter the Ninja, 1981. Anime and manga took it further, with characters like Naruto and Snake Eyes cementing ninjas as superhuman heroes. Video games, Ninja Gaiden, Tenchu, made shinobi into pixelated legends, leaping across rooftops with impossible grace. Today, ninjas are everywhere. Halloween costumes, energy drinks, even emojis. But the real shinobi, the farmers and spies who lived and died in the shadows, are lost beneath the glitter. The truth beneath the myth. The ninja's legacy is a paradox. Their invisibility, their greatest strength, ensured they'd be forgotten as people but remembered as symbols. The shinobi of Iga and Koga didn't fight for fame, they fought for survival, for their villages, for one more day. Their skills, cunning, improvisation, endurance, were born of necessity, not magic. Yet the myths that erased their humanity also kept their spirit alive. Every time we watch a ninja dodge a laser trap in a movie or cheer for a manga hero, we're echoing the real shinobi struggle, even if we don't know their names. The final shadow. The story of the shinobi is a tragedy wrapped in a legend. They were ordinary people, farmers, women, outcasts, thrust into an extraordinary world of danger and deception. They didn't choose to be ninjas, life chose for them, and they paid the price. Betrayed by those they served, hunted by those they defied, forgotten by the history they shaped, the shinobi lived and died in the shadows. Their end wasn't glorious, but it was human, a quiet fade into the night, leaving only whispers behind. So, as we close this series, let's raise a cup to the real ninjas. Not the ones in movies, but the ones who crawled through mud, lied through their teeth, and vanished so others could live. They weren't heroes or villains. They were survivors, and their story reminds us that even the smallest shadow can change the world. The ashes of Iga, a world shattered. In 1581, Oda Nobunaga unleashed hell on Iga province, the heartland of the shinobi. His armies, tens of thousands of samurai, armed with swords, spears, and early firearms, swept through the rugged hills like a tsunami. Villages burned, fields were trampled, and entire clans were slaughtered. The shinobi fought back with everything they had, ambushes from the forests, traps in the passes, smoke bombs to blind the invaders. But this wasn't a skirmish they could win with cunning. Nobunaga's forces were too many, too relentless. By the time the fires died down, IGA was a graveyard, its ninja clans broken, its secrets scattered like ash on the wind. For the survivors, the world they'd known was gone. Picture yourself as a shinobi from IGA, maybe one of the lucky ones who escaped by hiding in a riverbed or blending into a crowd of fleeing peasants. Your village is rubble, your family dead or missing, your kunai dulled from fighting off samurai. The network of clans that taught you, fed you, gave you purpose, it's shattered. The scrolls with your smoke bomb recipes? Burned. The uncle who showed you how to climb a wall? Gutted. You're alive, but for what? The daimyo who once hired you now see IGA as a cursed name, and Nobunaga's men are hunting stragglers to make sure the ninja never rise again. Some shinobi tried to rebuild. In hidden pockets of IGA or neighboring Koga, survivors banded together, sharing what little they had, a few weapons, scraps of knowledge, a flicker of defiance. They took small jobs, spying on local lords, sabotaging rival merchants, to keep their clans alive. But it was a shadow of the old days. Without the chaos of warring daimyo, the demand for ninjas was drying up. And every mission carried a new risk. Nobunaga's allies were watching, ready to crush any hint of shinobi resistance. A single failed job could bring samurai to your doorstep, and this time, there'd be no escape. Others fled, scattering across Japan. A shinobi might head north to the wilds of Ezo, south to Kyushu's ports, or east to the mountains of Kanto, hoping to start over as a farmer, fisherman, or monk. But the past clung like damp cloth. Your accent, your scars, the way you scanned every room for exits, they marked you as IGA, as ninja. Villages didn't trust strangers, especially not ones who looked like they'd seen too much. And if a samurai patrol caught wind of your history, you were dead, no questions asked. For many, fleeing meant trading one danger for another, a life of hiding in plain sight, always one step ahead of the ghosts of IGA. Adapting to Hideyoshi's Japan. A new game, same shadows. After Nobunaga's death in 1582, Toyotomi Hideyoshi rose to power, aiming to unify Japan under his iron grip. Unlike Nobunaga, Hideyoshi didn't want to wipe out the shinobi, he wanted to use them. A pragmatist, he saw their skills as tools for his conquests. But his vision of a unified Japan left little room for the freelance chaos that had defined the ninja's world. For the scattered shinobi, surviving in Hideyoshi's era meant adapting to a game where the rules had changed, and the stakes were higher than ever. Some shinobi found work in Hideyoshi's service. He hired ninjas to spy on rival daimyo, infiltrate rebel strongholds, or spread disinformation to weaken his enemies. A shinobi might pose as a scribe in a warlord's court, copying letters that revealed troop movements, or slip into a monastery to eavesdrop on monks plotting resistance. These jobs paid well, rice, cloth, sometimes protection for your family, but they came with chains. Hideyoshi demanded loyalty, and his spies watched his spies. Step out of line, and you'd be branded a traitor, your village punished as a warning. For IGA survivors, working for the man who'd inherited Nobunaga's legacy felt like swallowing poison, but hunger and fear made the choice for you. Others went rogue, taking jobs on the fringes. Merchants, desperate to outmaneuver competitors, hired shinobi to steal trade secrets or sabotage shipments. Local lords, too weak to challenge Hideyoshi openly, used ninjas to stir trouble without leaving fingerprints. These jobs were riskier than the old days. Hideyoshi's Japan was more connected, with spies and informants in every town. A shinobi caught burning a rival's warehouse might face not just the local magistrate but Hideyoshi's enforcers, who'd trace the job back to its source. And the pay was worse. Merchants haggled over every coin, and small-time lords often forgot to deliver the promised rice. For every successful mission, there were 3 that ended in betrayal or a sprint through the woods with dogs on your tail. Kunoichi faced their own struggles. Female ninjas, with their knack for blending into households as maids or entertainers, were still valuable. A kunoichi might infiltrate a daimyo's castle as a concubine, passing secrets to Hideyoshi's agents while dodging the jealousy of other women and the paranoia of the lord's advisors. Before you knew it, you were no longer sneaking into a castle for a night. You were living there for months, maybe years, as a servant or geisha, convincing everyone you belonged. But every secret you sent to your client tightened the noose, knowing that if you were caught, death would be the least of your worries, humiliation or worse would come first. And when you finally returned to your village, you faced whispers from those who distrusted you for spending so long among the enemy. The cost of survival. Surviving after IGA's fall came at a steep price. Every shinobi who took a job, whether for Hideyoshi or a shady merchant, risked losing what little they had left. Your skills, honed over years of sneaking and scheming, were your only currency, but they were also a curse. Every mission reminded you of the home you'd lost, the clan you'd failed, the life you'd never reclaim. And the world was closing in. Hideyoshi's spies were everywhere, and his unification efforts meant fewer wars, fewer rivals, fewer reasons to hire a ninja. The shadows were shrinking, and with them, your place in the world. Paranoia, already a shinobi's constant companion, grew sharper. You couldn't trust your clients. They might be testing your loyalty for Hideyoshi. You couldn't trust your allies. Another shinobi might sell you out to save their own skin. Even your own instincts felt unreliable. Was that job offer a chance to eat, or a trap to lure you into the open? Some shinobi cracked under the strain, abandoning their trade to live as beggars or hermits. Others doubled down, taking riskier jobs to prove they were still the shadows of old. Most just kept going, mission after mission, until a blade, a betrayal, or a bad fall ended it all. For the shinobi who clung to their old ways, the cost was even higher. Refusing to serve Hideyoshi meant living as an outlaw, hunted by samurai and shunned by villages. You might hide in the mountains, stealing food to survive, but every theft drew attention. You might try to rally other survivors, dreaming of rebuilding IGA's glory, but those dreams died fast. Too few shinobi, too many enemies. The world had moved on, and the ninja, once masters of chaos, were now relics, fighting a war that was already lost. Here we are, at the final flicker of the shinobi's flame, standing in a Japan that's left the ninja behind. Our journey has taken us through the gritty reality of shinobi life, from their peasant roots to their desperate struggle after IGA's fall. Last time, we saw the survivors of Nobunaga's wrath scatter, adapting to Toyotomi Hideyoshi's unified Japan with gritted teeth and fading hopes. Now, we're in the Edo period, under the Tokugawa shogunate, where peace has smothered the chaos that once fueled the ninja. This episode is about the last shinobi, how they clung to existence, morphed into something new, and became myths that outlived them. Grab a cup of tea, picture a quiet Edo street where shadows no longer hide secrets, and let's bid farewell to the ninja. Hit that like button if you're ready to see the end of an era, and comment with what legend you'd want to become if you vanished from history. Ready? Let the moonlight fade, and let's walk the final path. The Tokugawa peace. No place for shadows. When Tokugawa Ieyasu cemented his rule in 1603, Japan entered the Edo period, a time of stability, bureaucracy, and suffocating order. The Sengoku era's endless wars were gone, replaced by a single shogun who demanded absolute loyalty. For the shinobi, this was a death knell. Their world had thrived on chaos, rival daimyo, fractured alliances, constant betrayal. Now, with one ruler and a network of loyal samurai, the need for freelance spies and saboteurs evaporated. The Tokugawa shogunate didn't destroy the shinobi like Nobunaga did, it simply made them irrelevant. Some shinobi tried to fit into this new Japan. The Tokugawa regime, paranoid about rebellion, maintained its own intelligence network, and a few ninjas found work as informants or guards. A shinobi from Koga might serve as a scout for a Tokugawa lord, tracking bandits or sniffing out plots in distant provinces. A kunoichi might pose as a servant in a noble's household, reporting whispers of disloyalty to the shogun's spies. These roles were steady but humiliating. Once, shinobi had been masters of their own fate, choosing their clients and wielding fear like a weapon. Now, they were cogs in a machine, answering to samurai who saw them as dirty tools, barely better than peasants. Others drifted to the edges of society. In Edo's bustling cities or rural backwaters, former shinobi took up mundane lives: blacksmiths, herbalists, even actors in traveling troupes. Their skills didn't vanish entirely. A shinobi-turned-merchant might use his old tricks to eavesdrop on competitors, slipping a rival's trade secrets to a client for extra coin. A kunoichi running a tea-house might listen to samurai gossip, passing tidbits to local officials for protection. But these were shadows of their former lives, small hustles to survive in a world that no longer valued their craft. And always, they lived with the fear of exposure. A single rumor, that herbalist moves like an IGA man, could bring samurai to your door, demanding answers you couldn't give. The old clans were gone. IGA and Koga, once vibrant hubs of ninja culture, were now quiet villages under Tokugawa control. Some families preserved shinobi knowledge in secret, teaching their children how to mix poisons or move silently, but it was more tradition than necessity. Without missions to hone their skills, these techniques faded, becoming rituals rather than tools. By the mid-17th century, the shinobi as a distinct group were nearly extinct, their identity diluted into the fabric of a peaceful Japan. The birth of the ninja myth. As the real shinobi vanished, their legend grew. The Edo period, with its long peace, was a time of nostalgia for the Sengoku era's chaos. Commoners, bored with rigid Tokugawa rules, craved stories of rebels and tricksters who defied the system. Writers, artists, and playwrights obliged, turning the shinobi into larger-than-life figures. This was the birth of the ninja myth we know today, a mix of truth, exaggeration, and outright fantasy. The Bansen Shuki, 1676, a manual compiled by a former Koga shinobi, became a cornerstone of the myth. It detailed ninja techniques, disguises, poisons, espionage, but also added a layer of mysticism, suggesting shinobi had near-supernatural powers. Kabuki plays took it further, showing ninjas in black suits, wielding shuriken and vanishing in puffs of smoke. Woodblock prints depicted shinobi scaling castle walls or battling samurai with acrobatic flair, far from the muddy peasants who'd once crept through rice fields. These stories weren't about accuracy, they were about escape, giving audiences a taste of rebellion in a world where defiance was dangerous. For the last shinobi, these myths were a mixed blessing. On one hand, they kept the ninja's spirit alive, turning their forgotten clans into symbols of cunning and freedom. A shinobi-turned-farmer might hear a kabuki tale and feel a flicker of pride, knowing he'd once lived that life. On the other hand, the myths made real shinobi targets. Tokugawa officials, wary of anything that glorified rebels, cracked down on anyone suspected of ninja ties. A family caught teaching shinobi tricks could face exile or execution, their scrolls burned to prevent dangerous ideas. The more the ninja became legends, the harder it was for their descendants to preserve their heritage. Kunoichi faded even more quietly. Their roles, spies in teahouses, maids in castles, were less dramatic than the male shinobi's rooftop escapades, so Edo storytellers largely ignored them. But their legacy lingered in subtle ways. A geisha's sharp wit, a midwife's knack for secrets, these echoed the kunoichi skills, passed down through generations of women who knew how to listen and survive. Yet their names, like those of most shinobi, were lost, their contributions buried under the myth of the black-clad warrior. The final dissolution. By the 18th century, the shinobi were gone, not destroyed, but dissolved. Their skills lived on in fragments, a samurai's scouting tactics, a merchant's eavesdropping, a villager's herbal remedies. Their descendants blended into Edo society, their IGA or Koga roots forgotten or hidden. The Tokugawa shogunate, obsessed with control, ensured no new ninja clans could rise. Surveillance was tight, travel was restricted, and any hint of rebellion was crushed. The world that had birthed the shinobi, a fractured, warring Japan, was a memory, replaced by a nation where order trumped all. Yet the ninja's end wasn't just a loss. It was a transformation. The shinobi's spirit, cunning, resilience, the ability to thrive in the margins, lived on in Japan's underbelly. Bandits, rebels, even early yakuza borrowed their tricks, using stealth and deception to skirt Tokugawa law. And in the stories told by firelight, the ninja became immortal, their struggles romanticized into tales of defiance. When Japan opened to the world in the 19th century, these stories spread, planting the seeds for the global ninja craze we know today. The real shinobi didn't live to see their legacy. They died as they lived, in the shadows, their names erased, their sacrifices forgotten. But their story reminds us that even in a world that demands conformity, the shadow can endure, whispering rebellion to those who listen.